The United States Air Force still publishes a number: 700. That is how many of its 12,618 sighting reports were never explained. The number sits on its website today. I went looking for one case inside it. It is not there. On the 21st of August, 1955, 11 people ran out of a farmhouse in Kentucky and drove to a police station. 7 of them were children. The Air Force never took official notice of any of it. The government's own file says otherwise. So what is that number actually counting? I want to be careful here, because the word does not mean what people think it means. Unidentified in this system is never a verdict about the sky. It is a filing decision. Project Blue Book was the office that collected reports of things people saw overhead from 1952 until it closed in 1969. And when it could not match a report to an aircraft or a balloon or a star, a clerk ticked a box. That is all the word ever meant. A box ticked. The most watched telling of this case in the world runs 39 minutes and has been seen more than 500,000 times. It is careful. It is sourced. And when it reaches the government paperwork, it says this: the files on the Hopkinsville encounter basically simply state that no government investigation took place and that it was a hoax. I've read that file. Neither half of that sentence is true. There is no hoax finding anywhere in it. And the conclusion box on the record card doesn't say hoax, and it doesn't say balloon, and it doesn't say aircraft. That file has been public since 1975, so why has nobody looked? I want to ask a smaller question than the one everybody asks about this case. Never mind what came across the fields. What did the paperwork do? Start with what 11 people said. It has been retold 1,000 times, and it is worth hearing in their words rather than in mine. The farmhouse sat at Kelly Station, a scattering of farms 6 or 7 miles north of Hopkinsville in western Kentucky. Not a town. A road with houses on it. In that house that Sunday evening were Glennie Langford, a widow of 50, her 3 youngest children, her 2 grown sons and their wives, her daughter-in-law's brother, and a visiting couple.
About 7 o'clock, a young man named Billy Ray Taylor went out to the well and came back saying he'd seen something silver drop out of the sky into the gully at the end of the fields. Nobody believed him. Nobody went to look. No one walked the 200 yards down to that gully with a lantern. No one wrote down the time. No one thought it was worth standing up for. And that is the reason there is no physical evidence in this case at all. Because the only chance anybody ever had to find any came and went while 11 people sat inside and laughed at him. I should say now that Taylor is the weakest witness in this story, and I'm not the first to say so. Isabel Davis spent a year investigating on the side of the people in that house, and even she wrote that he was the only member of the group who appeared to arouse immediate doubt in everyone who talked to him. He elaborated. He enjoyed the attention. The entire flying saucer, the thing that makes this a UFO case at all, rests on him. What happened next doesn't. An hour later, the dog started barking, then hid under the house and stayed there until morning. Something was crossing the fields. It stood about 3.5 feet tall. It had a round head that looked too big for it, arms reaching almost to the ground, and hands that ended in talons. The eyes are the detail everyone remembers. The eyes were large and had neither pupil nor eyelid, and they glowed yellow. The legs are the detail almost nobody quotes. The witnesses said they were as spindly as broom handles. They were never seen to bend. And no knee. No give. Like a thing walking on stilts. What do you do when that comes toward your back door in the dark? For 3 hours, the men in that house fired at it. A 20 gauge, a 12 gauge, a 22 rifle. They fired at the back door and through a window screen and up at the roof and into a maple tree. Nothing was ever hit in a way that left anything behind. No body. No blood. When one was struck on a limb or on the roof, it didn't drop. It floated down. Once, around the corner of the house, at a range of a few feet, Lucky Sutton put a 12 gauge on one and fired.
It sounded as if the shots had hit a metal bucket. Then it got up and ran. Hold on to that sound. We'll need it later. There is one more thing from that night, and it is the only sentence anyone in that house said that is not about shooting. The creatures came toward the house slowly, with their hands raised. The widow told a local radio engineer the next morning what she thought that meant. She thought the creatures were trying to establish communication. No one has ever done anything with that sentence. Why not? Around 11, the whole household got into 2 cars and drove 8 miles to the police station. More than a dozen officers went back out with them, from the city, the county, and the state. They searched the property, and they found a hole in a window screen. The only document any of them signed that night runs 9 words. It is Glennie Langford's statement, taken the next morning, and the operative clause is this: and they shot at it, and it left. Now the part that is not in the retellings. The official position was that the case had never been reported to them through channels, and that they had therefore taken no official notice of it. That was said at the time, and it has been repeated ever since, in books, in documentaries, and in the town itself, which now holds a festival every August for the Little Green Men, a color that does not appear anywhere in the first newspaper account. It is the reason the case sits outside the official history, and it is the one claim in this whole story that nobody has ever gone back and checked. So who came? Military police from Fort Campbell were at that farmhouse. Fort Campbell is the post on the Kentucky and Tennessee line with an air base attached, the nearest installation to Kelly, about 20 minutes away. A private first class from there was at the house, and his account and his pictures ran in a Tennessee newspaper. A reserve major went out the morning after. The state police investigated and filed a report with sketches, and according to a memorandum written by J. Allen Hynek, 2 men from an unidentified agency at Standiford Field in Louisville looked into it as well. Every one of those facts comes out of the government's own paperwork. There is a regulation that governs all of this. Air Force Regulation 200-2. It told every base in the country what to do when somebody reported an unidentified object, and which office was supposed to resolve it. None of that happened here. In 1957, when somebody finally asked the base what its people had done, the answer came back from the adjutant. He stated that to his knowledge, an official investigation was never ordered. And then this, which is the line I keep returning to. A search of base files failed to produce any record of correspondence regarding this matter. The men were there. The paper is empty. How are both of those true at once?
That space between them is where this whole episode lives. One man in uniform went to the farmhouse and wrote something down. And what he wrote became the entire eyewitness record. His name was John Albert, a reserve major driving to Campbell for training on the morning of the 22nd, who heard the story on the radio at Grace. He called the base. Somebody there suggested that since he was close, he might as well find out whether there was anything to it. I want to mark that because it matters later. He didn't go on his own initiative. He was sent. At the farm, he spoke to a deputy sheriff and took a statement from the widow. Then he wrote his conclusion. There was nothing to show that there was anything to prove this incident. That sentence is the sum total of the on-site finding. But how did he get there? The rest of his report is where he explains the family, and the rest is the part nobody quotes. He wrote that the widow belonged to the Holy Roller Church. He wrote that the household had been at a religious meeting that evening. He wrote that the congregation and the family had been worked up into a frenzy, becoming very emotionally unbalanced. He wrote that they'd sent away for a magazine article containing a photograph of what looked like a little man and was actually a monkey painted silver. Then he offered two possible explanations. Either a monkey had escaped from a circus in the area, or the family had been so stirred up by a picture of a monkey that their imaginations ran away with them. Isabel Davis interviewed those people. She established that the widow didn't belong to the Holy Roller Church. She established that there was no religious meeting that night. She established that there was no radio in that farmhouse at all. Of the claim that the family had been worked into a frenzy, she wrote 4 words. It must be pure invention.
I'm not telling you the family were right about what they saw. I'm telling you that the only witness account the government ever produced describes an evening that didn't happen. Nothing in that file shows he interviewed the 2 men who fired the guns. Nothing shows he spoke to the women. Nothing shows he went near the 7 children. And nothing shows he ever walked down to the gully to look at the place where all of this was supposed to have started. He talked to a deputy sheriff who told him there was nothing to see, and then he did not go and see for himself. And there was one more thing about that report, easy to miss, hard to unsee once you have seen it. Major Albert visited the farm on the 22nd of August, 1955. He gave his statement to the adjutant on the 26th of September, 1957. He wrote it down 2 years later. Why would a man do that? So if nobody was investigating, what was the file? Because there is a file. That is the thing that took me a while to sit with. No official investigation. No base records. No report through channels. And nevertheless a folder at Wright-Patterson with newspaper clippings in it, and a signed witness statement, and correspondence, and memoranda passing between the head of Project Blue Book and the man who'd become the most famous scientist in the field. In September of 1956, more than a year after the night itself, Hynek wrote to Captain George Gregory, who by then was running the office, and set out which agencies had been to the farmhouse. The chief of police is named in that memo. His name is blacked out in the copy that was released. And then Gregory wrote a memorandum of his own. It carries no date. It is headed Hopkinsville case, and it is the reason I'm making this episode. He begins by noting that the case has not yet been brought to the official attention of the Air Force. Then he explains what that means for them. Arrived suddenly and cold at the Air Technical Intelligence Center, which was the headquarters that Wright-Patterson office answered to, and he calls some embarrassment. Then he writes the sentence. Countermeasures are considered warranted. It is for this reason all possible information is being collected by this. I've read that a number of times. I don't think it is sinister. I think it is worse than sinister. I think it is ordinary. It is a man getting his story straight before he's asked a question in public, and saying so in writing, in a memo, in a government office, about a farmhouse in Kentucky. Read it at its weakest, and it still says what it says. Is that information being collected to find out what happened? It is not. But it is being collected so that somebody can be ready. There is a line further down the same page about how it was done. Every effort was made through the discreet efforts of our informant to either initiate some discreet investigative action or determine what had been done, without directly involving the Air Force. Who was the informant? I do not know. He does not say what the embarrassment would be. He does not say who the informant was. He does not say what countermeasures were being prepared or who they were meant to be used against. And the enclosure that would have told us is not in the folder that came back from Maxwell Air Force Base in 1975 when this material was finally released. And here is Gregory's working theory in the same memo held jointly with Hopkinsville. It has been reported that a native in the area stated there was a circus train near town a day or two before. However, this cannot be confirmed. And then, in the opinion of Dr. Hynek and the undersigned, if so, it is possible that some monkeys or apes escaped during the night. The monkey again. 2 years after Major Albert, at the top of the organization, resting on a rumor the memo itself says cannot be confirmed. In August of 1957, a direct question finally went to Fort Campbell. Do you want to know what prompted it? The Air Force has been informed by reliable sources that an article on this incident may soon appear in a magazine publication, and that the Air Force will be queried regarding its opinion or explanation. That is the trigger. Not 11 witnesses. A magazine. In the same document, before receiving a single piece of information back, they state their position. Lacking factual confirming data, no credence can be given this almost fantastic report. Isabel Davis put the obvious question better than I can. Is a report proved false by the very failure to pay any attention to it? Now, I've spent this whole episode on paper, and I owe you the other side at full strength, because there is a very good chance the other side is right. Joe Nickel has spent a career explaining cases like this one. In 2006, he went out to Kelly. He walked the site, read the newspaper clippings in the town library, and sat down with Lonnie Langford, who'd been 12 years old and hidden under a bed that night. His conclusion is that it seems likely that the famous 1955 Kelly incident is easily explained by a meteor and a pair of territorial owls. And when you put the bird beside the description, it is uncomfortable how well it fits. A great horned owl stands about 2 feet tall. Its eyes are enormous, fixed and yellow. It has no visible neck, so the head sits straight on the shoulders and looks too round and too big. It has tufts on its head. It has talons. Its legs are thin and stiff. Its wings, seen edge on while it stands, hang like long arms, almost to the ground. It hunts from dusk, and it is extremely aggressive when defending the nest, which is exactly what a thing that keeps coming back for 3 hours looks like. Knock an owl off a roof or a branch, and it doesn't fall. It glides. It floats down. Taylor's silver object becomes a bright meteor, and there were meteors reported in the area that night. The eyes fit. The legs fit. The floating fits. The aggression fits. So what does not fit?
An owl does not reach down off a roof and take hold of a man's hair. An owl does not ring like sheet metal when a shotgun goes off against it at a range of a few feet. And an owl does not keep a house of 11 people awake and armed from 8 in the evening until first light. 3 hours of it. 11 people leaving a home they had nowhere else to sleep in, to sit in a police station and tell a story that no one there believed. I'm not going to tell you Nickel is wrong. He might well be right. I want to tell you something else instead, and it is what this episode is actually about. Suppose he's completely right. Suppose it was owls. They still spent 2 years quietly collecting information on it. The head of the office still wrote down that preparatory countermeasures were warranted. And nobody ever said it was owls. Not in 1955. Not in 1957. Not once in 71 years. An organization that had solved this case had every reason in the world to announce it.
Why didn't it? Because it never solved the case. It managed the case. Which brings me to the card. Every sighting that office handled got a form. Project 10,073 record card. 1 page. Date, place, how long it lasted, how many objects, a short summary, and a column of boxes down the right-hand side where somebody ticked what it turned out to be. Aircraft. Insufficient data. There is a card for Hopkinsville, Kentucky, dated the 21st to 22nd of August, 1955. Ground visual. Source, civilian. Photos, no. Sketch. Number of objects, multiple. The summary field is where they write what happened. On this card, the summary field reads, in full, Little Men, see case file. And the box that is ticked is unknown. Even Joe Nickel says so, and he believes none of it. In his own article, in a sentence he passes over on his way to the owls, he records that the government ultimately listed the case as unidentified. So it is unidentified. Then should not it be in the 700? I went and looked. In the transcribed list of unexplained cases, the 1955 entries run in date order, and they go from case 3699 on the 11th of August in Iceland, straight to case 3720 on the 23rd of August in Arlington, Virginia. There is nothing on the 21st. There is nothing on the 22nd. I checked it against the largest independent catalog of these unknowns, built by a researcher going through the microfilm case by case. Kelly is in that one. It is entry 1148, and the column where its case number should go is empty. The Arlington sighting, 2 days later, carries its number, 3720, right there in the same column. 2 sources, and neither can find a case number for the most witnessed creature report in American history. Now I have to tell you the limit of that, because it is a real limit, and you should not take my word for more than it is worth. The list I checked is a transcription, and its own compiler says at the top that his count comes to 564, well short of 701. Nobody has the full list. So the absence is strong evidence, and it is not proof, and I will not pretend otherwise. But look at what has to be true for all of this to be innocent. They said they had no interest. Their people were on the property. There are no base records. They sent a major who wrote up a religious meeting that never happened. They opened a file for preparatory countermeasures. They asked their first direct question 2 years later because a magazine was coming. They ticked unknown. And the number they still give out today
701 was never a number about what happened in American skies. It is a number about what reached the desk. So what does a case have to do to get itself counted? It cannot be enough to be seen, because 11 people saw this one. It cannot be enough to be written down, because there is a card with writing on it. Does it have to come through the right door, in the right month, on the right form? This case never reached the desk. Is that an accident of the story? It is the story. And there is one more absence, which I did not expect and cannot get past. Nothing in that folder asks what the creatures looked like. Nothing asks why a family of 11 would walk out of a house they had nowhere else to sleep in. And the state police sketches that Hynek himself wrote down were sitting in Frankfurt, never reached that folder. No one in that building ever wanted to know. 11 people drove into town in the dark and told a police station what had been at their windows. 7 of them were children. And the only interpretation anyone offered that night from inside that house, that the raised hands and the slow walk meant those things were trying to talk to them, has never appeared in any government file anywhere. I don't know what was in the fields at Kelly Station. I'm not going to tell you it was a craft. I'm not going to tell you it was a bird. I know what they wrote down. Little men, see case file. And I know which box they ticked.